If something smells nice, start worrying. I work for a small newspaper company and I usually just write about things happening in the community. One story, though, got me particularly interested, and it was about a woman who lived in filth. Her neighbors had been complaining about odd foul smells coming from her house. It isn't the type of story that I usually do, but it was different, and that's what got me interested. When I got to her house, I could clearly see from the front of the house how filthy it all was. The thought of going inside started to become a regrettable decision. I mean, first encounters count, right? And I didn't mean to be so judgmental straight away, but looking at her house, it gave off the sort of impression that this was a person who didn't look after herself that much. I also talked with some of the locals, and what they told me about her didn't give off a good judgment of character. This woman was clearly out of touch with everything around her. At the same time, I wanted to know more about her, and me being a nosy person, I couldn't help but wanting to know more about her. Clearly something had happened in her life to make her live like this. I had already called her to make sure she was okay with me looking into her life, and she agreed to show me her way of life and to explain to me why she lives the way she does. The filth had a stench, and I was surprised that she hadn't died from any bacteria or virus, because it seemed like the right environment for bacteria and viruses to survive. Her mental state was questionable, and she had old cassette players and VHS players all over the place which don't really exist anymore. When I asked her why she lived like this, all that she could tell me was that as long as filth smelled like the way it should, it was all good. Everything was a mess, and I don't know why, but it kind of all got me being grateful for all of the things I had in my life. On the other hand, I am sure someone with OCD would love to clean every speck of this place, and with everything out of order, it told me that her life must have been out of control. Things were broken, and she survived on government benefits and some inheritance from her parents. I could hear small things moving around, and they must have been rats or some other animal. It's weird how animals can survive in such mess. I guess their immune system must be better than ours. Actually, maybe this woman's immune system might be amazing at this point, because she has survived this long in this mess. She then told me about her mother and father. She was brought up in a 5-bedroom house. She also had 2 younger siblings, and after she had told me that she had siblings, I quickly assumed that her siblings had wanted nothing to do with her, which I was gravely wrong about. I tried asking more questions about her upbringing, but all she told me was just go to the house of my childhood and notice how the filth gives off an amazing aroma. I then went to her childhood home, and I could clearly see that it had been abandoned for many years, and Mother Nature had clearly took over the house. It's sad how houses begin to go under after they had been abandoned, and it reminded me of the only thing I had remembered in my sociology class before I changed courses to journalism. It's people that give meaning to buildings and materialistic things, not the object itself. I kicked the door down, as I could clearly see that the front door was past its prime. From what the house looked like, I had expected odor and stench to hit my nose, but instead I got to smell the most amazing aroma I had ever smelt in my life. I then started searching her childhood home for anything interesting to find. This woman's childhood home was exactly like her own house, and I don't know why, but I started to become irritated by this woman. In my generation, we are finding it difficult to even buy a home, and even if someone from my generation has managed to somehow buy a home, it's hard to keep it maintained. Yet this woman has managed to live in a big childhood home as well as having her own home, which clearly she had decided to neglect it. It's unfair, but I guess life is just unfair. It was all a mess, and I was beginning to find it all predictable with the neglect of having any care or pride in one's own life. Maybe her parents were abusive, and I wondered more about her siblings, because now I wanted to know why she was so alone in the world. We all need someone no matter who we are, but then again, loneliness is a big problem in Western civilization, and we even have someone in the government whose main job is to tackle things like loneliness. Loneliness becomes more apparent as we get older, and this woman was old now, and with the inventions of social media and computer games, it's made loneliness even more stronger. The only good but odd thing about this woman's childhood home is the nice aroma and smell. I decided to follow the aroma because I couldn't resist it anymore. The aroma could be smelt the most from behind the sofas, and you know how in cartoons when one cartoon character follows a pack of sweets all lined up because it was being set up. That's what happened to me. When I looked behind the sofas, I gasped with horror and with utter disbelief, because I never thought that I would ever look upon something so disgusting and completely random. I saw 4 skeleton bones still giving off a perfume-like scent, and this is not the type of smell you would think death could give off. I mean, with an amazing smell present, you would think something was full of life to give such a scent. I went back to see the woman and I didn't call the police just yet because I wanted to know more, and I wanted her permission first of how to proceed with everything that I had just found. When I told this woman a filth of what I had experienced in her childhood home, she started tearing up. Instead of calling the police, she just turned on the VHS player and I started to watch something, like an explanation video. At the same time, I also have to shamefully admit that as a journalist writer, finding all of this would have progressed my career in the journalism world. Even though I had just found something terrible, my career coming to my mind showed how I could have profited from this. Anyhow, the video told me more things about what was really going on. Hello, my name is Dr. Rogerson Peak. I have invented a pill that could make any dead person smell nice. When a body starts decomposing, it usually starts to smell, but with this pill, a decomposing body will be the most sweet-smelling thing you have ever smelt. The cassette player kept on playing. After watching the whole video, a few thoughts came to mind. Yes, the pill would give the dead person a bit more dignity by smelling nice, and it will also help people who deal with dead bodies like in hospitals. But at the same time, this might be a great advantage for a murderer or serial killer. Imagine someone had murdered someone in your home, but the murdered person had this pill before being murdered. It could be some time before you notice something is off. Something smelling nice usually doesn't give an image of death or tell you that something is decomposing. It's always the nasty smell which makes us think something is off. Like when I was in this woman's childhood home, I honestly didn't think I would find something to be dead. Do you see how this might be an advantage for a serial killer or murderer? And I started to understand why this woman lived like the way she lived now for such a long time. I felt bad for being so judgmental or for thinking about my career gain off this whole story. I also started glue together who those skeletons belonged to. From common sense, those skeletons behind the sofa in her childhood home must have been her 2 parents and 2 siblings, and I thought they had just abandoned her because of the way she had lived her life. Is someone trying to kill you? I asked this woman. My whole family took part in the experiment to eat the pill. We were struggling for money at the time, and they promised us that they would pay us lots of money to eat the pill. They weren't 100% honest with us, and none of us knew what the pill was made for exactly, she told me. She started crying a little bit, and the more I understood her story and why she lived the way she did, it was sad, just so sad. How we humans can be so unsympathetic or not care enough to understand someone but rather to just judge and cast aside. After taking the pill, one midnight someone broke into my home, and I was just a child back then, and this man had murdered my mother, my father, and both my siblings. I hid in a secret wall cupboard in my room which my father had built. For weeks this strange man who broke into my house observed my whole family's dead bodies. They all started to smell nice as they decomposed. I overheard his talk on the phone, and they wanted to use this pill in war and other scenarios where death is common. But they wanted to hide the deaths and murders. If something smells nice, no one would ever think something has died, she explained to me. She managed to escape when the strange man went for a smoke in her garden, and I couldn't believe what I had just been told. This story was not just a story, but probably one of the biggest scandals in the 21st century. I had to write about this and get this story out, and I phoned the police about the 4 skeletons in this woman's childhood home. Something had to be done, and we all know how shady the government can be and some of the things they can be capable of. This woman deserved justice. I hugged her, and she pleaded me not to go to the police, but obviously I decided to go against her word. I went back to my flat, and as soon as I entered, a beautiful scented aroma hit my nose, but I never sprayed anything inside my flat recently. I checked my whole flat, and I found a dead body in my bathtub. The dead body had a note attached to it which read, "Be wary of your steps, lad." I straight away drove to the woman's house, and this time, instead of the scent of filth hitting my nose, it was a perfume-like aroma, and I knew she had been murdered in her own living room. There was a note on her body which read, "We are watching, and the dead body in your flat has been taken now." And I couldn't believe it. I checked her childhood home, and everything inside had been taken, and no sign of police of any kind. They knew I would check on this woman after finding a dead body in my apartment as well as her childhood home. I am being watched now.